was as if Middie had walked through a door that wasn't there. What the hell happened to Middie Rivers? There are places in America that feel wrong. Places where you can't quite explain the silence, where compasses spin without warning, where sound dies too fast. In southwestern Vermont, there's a stretch of land the locals don't talk about much. Not unless you ask. It covers dense forest, abandoned roads, and long-forgotten mountain trails. It's called the Bennington Triangle. And for decades, it has taken people. Welcome back to Cracked Relic. This is episode 2 of our series on the Bennington Triangle. A string of real disappearances so strange, so perfectly patterned, that even skeptics start to wonder if something unnatural is at work. Today's story is where it all began. Not with a child, not with a drifter, but with a man who knew the mountain. He didn't get lost. He vanished. This is the disappearance of Middie Rivers. Middie Rivers was born in the hills of southern Vermont sometime in the 1870s. A lifelong outdoorsman, he lived in or near the town of Bennington for most of his life. By 1945, Middie was 74 years old. But anyone who knew him would have told you he didn't act his age. He was lean, wiry, strong. Years of hunting, trapping, and guiding through the thick forests near Glastenbury Mountain had kept him sharp. People in the region knew Middie. He wasn't some recluse. He was dependable, quiet, yes, but not mysterious. He was simply put a man of the mountains, and in Bennington, that meant something. The forest he spent his life in was no joke. The Long Trail, one of the oldest long-distance hiking trails in the country, snaked through the region. The terrain around it was steep and unforgiving. The foliage could close in fast. Paths were poorly marked, overgrown, and misleading. But Middie didn't just navigate the wild, he understood it. As a guide, he led others through it without maps. He was known to say things like, quote, "You don't need a compass when the trees speak to you." But somehow, it always worked out. That autumn of 1945, Middie was still taking groups into the hills, and one seemingly ordinary trip, would be his last. It was November 12th, 1945. Middie Rivers was guiding a group of 4 hunters through an area near Bickford Hollow, just at the base of the Glastenbury Mountain. The terrain was steep, the air crisp. It was late fall, one of the last hunting trips before winter would settle in. The group had spent much of the day trekking the remote ridges and valleys. Middie, as always, led from the front, moving with confidence and ease. By all accounts, he was in good spirits. The hunters later said Middie kept a steady pace, stopping occasionally to point out landmarks or check the path ahead. At some point in the early afternoon, Middie rounded a bend in the trail ahead of the others. Just a few dozen yards. Nothing strange. And he was never seen again. No scream, no sound of a fall, no gunfire, no sign of a struggle. He was simply there one moment and gone the next. The group initially assumed he'd gone slightly off trail or backtracked. They searched the immediate area for over an hour, calling his name. The terrain was rugged but not impossible. They retraced their steps. They checked every fork in the trail. By dusk, they returned to Bennington and raised the alarm. At first, no one panicked. Middie was a survivalist. If anyone could spend the night in the woods, even at 74 years old, it was him. People assumed he'd simply gotten turned around or decided to camp overnight and would emerge the next morning. But he didn't. Not the next morning, not the next day, not ever. The following day, a full-scale search effort began. It started with locals, family, friends, hunters, hikers. Then came the sheriffs, then the military. Over the next week, more than 300 people joined the search. Local newspapers like the Bennington Evening Banner and the Rutland Daily Herald covered it extensively. From the November 14, 1945 edition of the Banner, quote, "No signs of Rivers found despite all-day search through deep timber north of Glastenbury." Searchers scoured a 6-mile radius around the area where Middie was last seen. 6 miles is, it as a radius through mountainous terrain, is pretty nuts. They formed human chains, combing the forest in lines, shoulder to shoulder. They used bloodhounds, planes, and military search protocols, most of them borrowed from Fort Devens, Massachusetts. Despite their efforts, the forest gave up almost nothing. The only clue? A single rifle cartridge found in a nearby stream. It was consistent with the type Middie carried. Some speculated he may have been reloading when he dropped it. But that didn't explain the rest. No footprints, no torn clothing, no blood, no campfire, no gear. As one volunteer told the Banner, quote, "It's like he stepped between two trees and vanished into the air." Even the dogs lost his scent just a few feet beyond the last known spot. It was as if Middie had walked through a door that wasn't there. With the search yielding nothing, people began to ask, what the hell happened to Middie Rivers? Let's break down the theories. Some logical, some not so much. 1. Natural causes. The simplest explanation. Middie Rivers suffered a medical emergency. Maybe a stroke, heart attack, or a fall. But here's the problem. Even if Middie had collapsed somewhere, 300 searchers would have likely found something. His rifle, his hat, a boot, a scrap of clothing, but they didn't. Not one piece of them, or his belongings. Even in steep terrain, it's rare for a body to vanish so thoroughly. Theory number 2. He just got lost and succumbed to the elements. Again, Middie knew the forest, but maybe he strayed farther than expected, got disorientated, and couldn't find his way back before nightfall. Plausible, except for the conditions. There hadn't been any sudden snowstorm. The weather was chilly but dry. Middie carried a rifle and likely had gear on him. He wasn't a casual hiker. He was a guide. And most importantly, no trace was found, not even months later when the snow melted. Number 3, animal attack. Black bears do live in the area, and so do bobcats and coyotes. Let's be real, like, coyotes coming after you, not so likely. But a predator attack would have left evidence. Tracks, blood, a disturbed scene. Nothing was found. Not even drag marks near the last place he was seen. Plus, Middie was armed. If he'd seen or heard something coming, he would have fought back or fired. 4, foul play. Some wondered if someone in the hunting party had a reason to harm Middie. Maybe a personal grudge, maybe an accident they covered up. But again, no evidence. The group he guided were thoroughly questioned. There were no known disputes, no known motives, and if something had gone wrong, wouldn't at least one of them have cracked over the years? No one ever did. 5. There's a fringe theory that Middie chose to vanish. Some suggest he wanted to die in the forest or start a new life. But why? He had no history of mental illness, no known enemies, no debts or secrets, and he was 74 years old. Starting a new life in 1945 without money, resources, or identity? That's not a clean break. That's suicide by wilderness. Again, we come back to the fact that no remains were ever found. And 6, the forest took him. And then we have the strangest theory of all. The Glastenbury mountain and the surrounding forest isn't just weird, it's hungry. Locals speak of places where the ground pulls you in. The Abenaki people, native to the region, believed the Glastenbury was cursed. An uninhabitable place where spirits roamed freely. They never settled there. There are stories of rock slides that seem to appear out of nowhere, whispers of vortexes, points in space where time or dimensions don't behave as they should. More than one folklorist has compared the region to Skinwalker Ranch or the Bridgewater Triangle, remote, wooded, and prone to unexplained vanishing. Could Middie have stumbled into something else? Something science doesn't have words for? Even before Middie Rivers vanished, the area now called the Bennington Triangle had a reputation. Let's start with the Glastenbury Mountain, the heart of the region. To outsiders, it's just another Vermont peak, heavily wooded, remote, beautiful in the fall, but for locals, and especially for those who grew up hearing the old stories, it's a different kind of place. One that doesn't want people. The Abenaki, the indigenous people of the region, held a deep mistrust of Glastenbury Mountain. According to oral histories passed down over centuries, they considered the area cursed or spiritually unsafe. One commonly cited Abenaki belief is that Glastenbury was a gateway, a place where the veil between worlds was thin, where people could cross over into another realm, intentionally or not. They believed the mountain was home to a stone in the forest, a strange boulder that would swallow anything that touched it. Stories of men stepping onto it and disappearing. Sounds like legend, but keep in mind, these tales were told before the modern disappearances ever happened, and the Abenaki refused to hunt or camp on the mountain. They simply avoided it and told others to do the same. In the 1800s, a town called Glastenbury actually existed on the slopes of the mountain. It had a sawmill, a few buildings, and a small population. But by the early 1900s, it was abandoned. Locals said odd things started happening before the town collapsed. Tools went missing, people heard voices in the trees, and shadows that didn't make sense. By 1937, the state of Vermont officially unincorporated Glastenbury. It was wiped off the map. Today, it's a ghost town. Roads leading there are rough and largely impassable. The forest reclaimed everything. And that area, those deep woods, that's where Middie disappeared. There are stories that compasses don't work properly around the mountain, that hikers report lost time, walking for hours only to find they've barely moved. Others claim there are no animal sounds in certain areas, just dead silence. No birds, no bugs, no movement. And for decades, this triangle has had a disturbing pattern. People go in and never come out. After Middie disappeared, these stories only got louder. Some claimed to see lights at night in the forest. Others swore they felt watched when they walked the long trail alone. One search volunteer wrote in his personal diary, quote, "You'd think a man left behind a boot print or a trail, but Middie didn't. It's like the trees erased him." End quote. And this was just the beginning. In the next 5 years, 4 people would vanish in or near the same area, all under bizarre, unexplainable circumstances. No connection between them, different ages, different backgrounds, different reasons for being in the woods. But they all had one thing in common: no trace. Ever. By late 1945, the search for Middie Rivers had officially ended. Not because anyone gave up, but because there was nothing left to find. There were no further clues, no confessions, no remains, and the woods offered no answers. Eventually, the military left, the volunteers went home, and the leaves turned to snow. The community of Bennington changed. People stopped going into the forest alone. Hunters who once roamed freely now stayed in pairs, or didn't go at all. Hikers avoided Glastenbury, and some locals refused to even talk about the mountain after dark. The disappearance became local folklore almost immediately. Old-timers would sit at the barber shop or the town diner and say things like, "The woods got him. Glastenbury don't take kindly to strangers. And he knew too much, or maybe just enough to wander too close to whatever's hiding in there." It wasn't long before people began tying his story into the ones that came after, because after Middie, the strange vanishings didn't stop. They accelerated. In December 1946, just a year later, a college student named Paula Weldon vanished in the same region. Her case exploded across newspapers. She was young, beautiful, and full of potential. Then came a child in 1949, an elderly woman in 1950, and a man on a bus in 1950 as well. Each time, the same outcome: no body, no trace, no explanation. Middie was the first in a pattern that would eventually be dubbed the Bennington Triangle. But the thing is, no one called it that in 1945. The name wouldn't come until decades later, coined by author and folklorist Joseph A. Citro. He connected the dots, mapped the disappearances, noticed that the strange energy wasn't just a story passed around town. It was a phenomenon. But the people of Bennington in 1945, they didn't need a name for it. They already knew something was wrong. They already knew the forest wasn't just a forest, and they already knew something took Middie Rivers. And whatever it wasn't done. Middie Rivers didn't go into the forest to die. He went to lead a group, to do what he'd done 100 times before, to move through the mountain like it was a part of him. But something somewhere between the trees and the silence took him. And what came next wasn't panic, it was fear. The kind that settles deep, the kind that stays quiet, the kind that never really goes away. Today, if you hike the long trail near Bickford Hollow, you'll see no plaque, no marker, no tribute to the man who vanished. Just woods, just wind, and just the feeling that something's not quite right. And Middie, he's still out there. Maybe, in a way, we'll never understand. Thank you for watching this episode of Cracked Relic, episode 2 of our Bennington Triangle series. Up next, episode 3, we'll be covering Paula Weldon, young college student whose disappearance would shake the entire state. Until then, stay safe, stay skeptical, and if the trail goes silent, get the fuck out of there. As always, sources are in the description and will be coming up after the video, and thank you for watching.